All right.
Yay.
Okay. Okay. So yes, I will say that again. So we're here to share with you a alternative governance model that exists within the United Methodist Church that is used by many other churches throughout the United States. I don't know about the world, but definitely the United States. And I have a friend from seminary who serves a church that is larger than ours that uses this model and speaks very highly of it. It works in churches of all sizes, and it is a way to use our time resources efficiently, and a way to release more of our people to be in service and discipleship and study, etc. And so the basic idea is to create a unified leadership board for the purpose of governance, which is different than how our committees function now. Right now, our committees function as both governance and management / implementation. So this model, it's called Simplified Accountable Structure, or SAS. It always makes me think of the shoes, but you know. And so it creates a board of 9 people that is simultaneously the church council, the finance, the trustees, and the SPRC. And so all of the different provisions within the Book of Discipline that apply to each of those committees apply to this unified committee. So you can't have people who are related to one another on the Staff Terrace Relations Committee. All of those nuances, they all apply to this board. And it typically would meet monthly. And then, can you go to the next slide? And then the actual management implementation pieces are done by ministry teams. Some of them will be standing ministry teams, like a building, maintenance team. Some of them will be short-term teams, like, once a year we would form a team of maybe 3 people to draft a budget proposal, and they would come together, draft the budget, present it, and then we would take it from there in terms of review and adoption. And so there is always a separate nominations committee. Of course, you wouldn't want a self-nominating anything. And in our case, let's see, can you go to the next slide, I think? Yeah. In our case, we would also maintain our separate preschool board, because we are in a state in which it is legally protective for us to have the preschool separately incorporated. And so we did that about 5 years ago. It is still a ministry of the church. So it is still nominated by a nominating committee. It is our ministry, but according to law / bylaw, it has to have its own standing team. So that would continue. And also, the United Methodist Men and the United Methodist Women have their own requirements of existence within the Book of Discipline. So they exist in their continued structure as well, and then still relate to the Board of 9. So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that.
Please.
That doesn't mean United Methodist Men, United Methodist Women would not necessarily be on the board.
Right.
They wouldn't. They're invited, and they could be a member of the board, but they're not on the board by virtue of being a UMM or UMW.
Right.
As opposed to the old structure where the president was on the board.
Exactly.
They were invited to be on the board.
Yes. So do we have our current, is the slide was like what we current? Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So again, just to remind us, the goal for today is to just share the concept, begin the conversation. The way it's laid out in this system, is the way that has been shown to work. But because it is an alternative structure, we have wiggle room. So if we can think of ways that it might better serve us, then we are allowed to incorporate those things. So we really want
So
to
the
generate
worker can get it out of here.
conversation, thoughtfulness, prayer, discernment, and there'll be a lot more steps after this before we make a decision. So why do churches adopt this? One, improved missional focus. So more intense accountable focus on vision, mission, and goals, which means more faithfulness
That worked. That one was new too.
into the Great Commandments. And again, that has to do with
But that's
focusing
work.
more on governance, deciding what we will do as opposed to how we will do it within the unified leadership, board. Next.
It works.
Okay. Next reason, alignment of vision. So this, by having a unified structure, it would help us to have strategic alignment, a generative space for being future focused, a focus on stewardship, and a focus on accountable leadership. Yes.
I was going to say, one of the things that this board is designed to be a much more of a strategic look at the church, not to get necessarily involved, get bogged down into the nuts and bolts of whether we should open the doors at 9:07 or 9:12. The theory being that there's other groups that can do that. That's not a question that should come before this board.
And then, of course, there's efficiency, avoiding bottlenecks and miscommunication in a decision process, better use of time, energy, and resources because multiple committees are not required, and disjointed priorities are avoided.
Maybe I've got a word that describes streamlining.
Yes, you're right. Streamlining is a great word for this. Yes. All right.
In this sense, the one thing that I would say that as we were looking at this, there's several reasons why you would do that. I really, and when you go through the workbook, which we've got it here, nice thick workbook, lots of pages in it.
It's thick.
And but one of the things that they mentioned is that we tried to find some examples of where we were, where we had bottlenecks. Some of these things are not going to, I think we do a really good job in terms of streamlining and efficiency from a financial standpoint. It's not like we get one group arguing over another group of where to spend the money or not to spend the money. But it is definitely, there's other areas that we think are going to be beneficial to this.
Yes, absolutely. Efficiency of time. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
particularly key leadership.
And that's kind of this slide. Simplifying structures means more leaders can put their spiritual gifts to work in ministry rather than in meetings. More disciples are available for the impactful work of forming, equipping, and sending disciples. And then guiding principles are adopted for efficiency and permission giving within healthy boundaries. So when I was talking on the phone with my friend Kathy, she said that they had just set a guiding principle on the process for setting the salary for the preschool director. So they aren't the ones who set the salary, but they set up that this is how it's done. So guiding principles are like our core values and also our, these are the steps to get this done, kind of thing. And you can adopt as many of those as we need, so that we can then empower, the people who are implementing whatever it is to just know that these are the guidelines and then go forth and serve. So our current structure, all of our committees have fewer than the full slate, the full maximum. Church council technically has 33 positions plus 9 at-large members on it. We never have that many people at church council, but that's how many people are in the structure right now. The board of trustees, of course, is 3 classes of 3. Finance is 3 classes of 3 plus all of the above. SPRC, 3 classes, 3 plus lay leaders and lay member. Nominations, and then preschool board. So that outlines our current structure that would be then all of the things except preschool board would then flow together into this group of 9 if we decided to go down this road.
And I think what's interesting to me about this structure is that this is probably the traditional structure that's been going on for a very long period of time. And I think it harkens back to a day when everyone wanted control, everyone wanted a piece of the pie. And that's why it was broken down, I think, like this. And maybe a little bit of span of control as well. But that's certainly why there's like, we never actually have counted it, but a lot of people should, would be needed.
Right. Well, and it also harkens. I mean, the structure that we use now dates back to between 1968 and 1970 when we merged, and that was a time in our collective lives in this country when institutionalism was still fairly strong. The world does not bless or favor large bureaucratic institutional functioning anymore. There was a time where that made a lot of sense, but we aren't in that time anymore.
And this model was, in a lot of ways, an effort to control the chaos
Of the merger. Yeah.
Not just merger, but all that everybody wanting a piece of the pie,
Mm-hmm.
to use Larry's phrase. Instead of having, say you got a 250 member church, this was the way of getting it down to y'all's numbers, 33 plus the 9.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it was designed to keep 250, it was designed so you didn't have 250 people shouting, you cut it down.
Okay, so this is an example of committees that would become ministry teams. And the thing to note here is that once they become ministry teams, they could come through nominations in the sense that nominations could say, hey, Fred, would you want to, serve in the clothing closet or whatever? But we would no longer have a formal nominations vote at charge conference process for, worship and missions and those sorts of things. As Jim, put it, he said it would function more like family life does, which, Jim and Sandy and Marty do a great job of inviting people to come and be a part of that. And so our ministry teams would begin to function more like that, where we would say, hey, Nancy, are you interested in being a part of this with us? And, and Nancy can say yes or no, but that's all there is to it. So the committees that would become ministry teams are listed here. I won't read them out, but if we, and I said all that. So.
And I think part of the theory would be that you would have that evangelism or family life would have a project. And then that would be the idea that people would come together for that 2 or 3 or 4 month time period to help on that thing. It would disband, and then they would reform into
whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, for the next thing.
Yeah.
Who's else is talking?
It's not showing it.
Who's this over here?
There are people that are online.
What's your woman doing?
She's
Yeah, I think the mute on that.
Could you describe how the worship, so we wouldn't have a worship committee?
We would still have a worship team. I mean, we would still need to have coordination of, all of the things. In terms of, we would still need an usher coordinator. We would still need all of those things. Yes. And the thing that we would then, we could think about how we want to function, and, like we just did a worship design team for Lent, which, is always very generative. So maybe rather than having worship committee meetings the way we do, we have worship design teams throughout the year. And then, a couple of times a year, if needed, we bring together our, coordinators of the altar guild and the ushers and the lay readers, et cetera. Or it may be that, I'm not sure that the coordinator of the altar guild and the coordinator of the ushers actually need to be in a room together, like for a meeting. Like, I don't know. We would have to decide if that's what we think we need to do. It might be that we can just, coordinate those things via just simple
So there would
communication.
still be a person who does the altar, a person who
Yeah.
does the
That's right.
acolytes, a person who does. the-
Absolutely. Yes.
I think that some of the detail, I mean, some of these things, we don't have the details worked out.
Right.
And that's why this process is designed to take a year to figure it out.
Mhm.
So it's not like we're going to do this next week. The theory would be, if we were to do it this November, December is when we would make the official call, and January 1st of next year is when we would implement whatever we decide we're going to do. That's the theory.
So who would be responsible for instance, the worship coordination?
Mhm.
So because that has to be a highly coordinated.
It does.
effort,
Slide on that, right?
Especially
You have a slide on that, don't you?
during
The
the
mission teams
holidays.
and the.
So
Yeah, it's back.
I
Yes.
guess what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that there might be some things in that list that are going to require.
Yeah, that will
strong
require an ongoing team
communications,
leader.
ongoing
Yeah.
leader,
Yep.
Where other ones you might be able to
That's right.
do that.
that's right.
So I think we would have to work. those
Right, we would, and we would
things
have
out.
to think about, what areas are we gonna need continuous ministry team leadership on, even if the people change within it, who would we need who's gonna make sure that all of those things get coordinated? Yeah,
But they would not necessarily be on church council or the leadership
Right.
team.
right.
They're still needed, but they're not.
Yeah.
Understood.
If I may, give you an example, junior conference, every time they get together for their annual business meeting, what we call annual conference, there is at least 2 or 3 different worship teams involved in the planning for that meeting. There's a team that deals with the ordination, a team for the mission service. One team does literally plans for 3 different worship services. There's not one permanent leadership position on council or on the conference council for that. They say, hey, would you chair this? And they get a committee together, they have volunteers. After annual conference, it technically disbands and reforms, starts planning for the next year, a month or 2 after annual conference.
Thank you.
Next one.
Yeah. Okay, so then what we've done here is we have listed out, if we did ministry teams, how we might organize them according to our mission statement. And then we, kind of to Gigi's point, we could perhaps have someone who is the person who stays in touch with all of these groups, because we have four areas of our mission statement. So maybe we would have 4 coordinators to stay in touch with these groups to just make sure that they have what they need and, are on track, et cetera. And, create the communication with the group of 9. So respectful minds, you get the idea. I think we can go next. And then outreaching arms, all of our ways that we outreach into the community, loving each other, the ways that we care for our church family, and together with God is our worship ministries, etc. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time there. We kind of all know what our ministries are, right? It's just to give you a concept, picture. All right, want to go next? Anything else to put in?
Just one thing, again, one of the other things we talked about is what's the relationship of those members of this leadership board and to these ministry teams. And again, it may be that they're leading it, almost like a dual-hatted. Whether or not, I think the book kind of discourages saying, you're on the board, you're in charge of worship. And I think that discourages that.
Well, it discourages it for saying you're the SPRC person to discourage silos. Like the SPRC, the finance or the trustees is what I think what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we decide out of your conglomeration of about 60 people, if there was no overlap on that first slide when you talked about leadership?
Yeah.
How do you compare that to 9?
I would like to
Everybody
say,
does
we don't get but maybe 10 or 13 people at an ad council meeting anyway.
Yeah.
I think we're already halfway there.
Yeah.
From a practice
So, I mean, it would come through the nominating process. And I'm sure there's more than one way to do it, but again, I had a conversation with my friend who lives with this structure. And one of the recommendations in the manual is what they do, which is they actually have people within the life of the church express interest to the nominating committee with the understanding that not everyone will be on the board. And then they have them fill something out about, you know, gifts and graces and why they feel led to do this, etc. And then the nominating committee interviews all of those people. And then they intentionally don't make any decisions because they take a month to think and pray. And then they come back together to discern which of the, I don't know, if we had 15 people, you know, which of the 9 we would invite to serve for this. And I mean, we'd still have 3 classes of 3. So when we first implement it, we'd have a 1-year, a 2-year, and a 3-year class. And then after that, it would be a 3-year class. So, I mean, that would be one method. Yeah.
If you're currently serving right now, where you guys are,
Yeah.
and then you want to go to this, does that term kind of continue, or is it going to start all over?
That's a great question. Only the nominating committee and the leadership team will have terms after this. And so people, you know, people might serve on the building and grounds committee for 2 years and then say they're done. Or, you know, I mean, Jim, how long have you been doing family life so faithfully?
Over 15 years.
Over 15 years. And
I will interject, just that one reason why I think we've been able to do the way we've done it is because we meet maybe 3 times a year. And that's mainly Easter time and Advent time. Other times we're going to email now. I will say I'm blessed with the people that I have.
Yeah.
Like, but we are somewhat in that mold now.
Yes.
Where, you know, we you know.
yeah,
don't
you
meet-
only meet as often as you absolutely must. And then you, I mean, you do more doing than meeting.
Right.
Yep.
And obviously with the advent of Zoom, it makes things probably a little bit even easier than it was. Were you thinking of any specific positions?
I just say like, SPRC,
Mhm.
right now, just say, I'm on SPRC.
Right,
and
you're
my
right.
term is, I'm going to be doing, next year I'm going off,
Mhm.
and now I'm nominated there, am I going to have another 3 years?
Yeah, 1, 2, or 3 years. That's right. I mean, essentially, it would reset the clock.
Okay, so another,
On
I can
any-
serve another 3 years.
You could.
Okay, that's. Okay.
Yeah, good question.
a-
Yeah,
Yeah, being that 1, 2, 3 term, at the end of the 3rd term, you have to take a year off and then come back after that.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yes. I'd have to double check that. I'm not 100%, but I think so.
For current rule, you know, it's probably changed, but current rules traditionally has been 3 years on, 1 year off.
Right. Exactly.
That's
Yep.
how it is.
Yep.
But again, I would say how often do we do it? So maybe the trustees can do that. We just shift people around.
We do. We shift people around. Yeah. I mean, people come off of this and we invite them to go on to that. Yes.
And trustees has had its own inbuilt loophole where you can be a permanent life member without, regardless of the 3-year
We
rotation.
have not been using that loophole.
Some churches do. Trust me, there are those that do.
Yeah,
But to that point, while we're talking about trustees, they still be voted on every time.
that's a great question. Yes. I mean, by law, we would still have to vote on our slate of 9 trustees.
Yeah.
And, you know, trustees legally are the ones who can make contracts for the church. You know, there is a, you know, a
So
process that we still have to follow.
So we will actually still have a board of trustees, even with construction.
Yes,
Is
we
that-
have to.
Yeah.
It's the same, right?
Thank you.
It's the same.
It's the
Yes.
same.
Yes. And we get to decide what it's called. So I'm not suggesting this is a name. I like the name that my friend's church uses, which is the Unified Leadership Board. And of course, then they call it the ULB because we have to make everything an acronym. But if we wanted to, we could call it the Board of Trustees. You know, I mean, that is the earliest term in Methodism for our governing structure.
Okay, I'm not confused then. What I'm saying is that we will still have a separate form a board of trustees, don't, I thought I
No.
said we needed it by the law, by bylaws.
No,
Okay.
we just have to have, yeah,
We
sure.
don't have to dwell on it.
No, but I mean, I think it's an important thing to dwell on. So this unified board, I mean, another way to think of it would be, they would be like super trustees. So they would be the trustees, we would vote on them. And then those same trustees would also wear the hat of trustees, finance, SPRC, and church council.
So all the legal functions of trustees.
Will be vested in this board.
Okay.
Yes,
That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
yeah. So this is, and I screenshotted some of these from if you all want to spend an hour and a half watching a video about this, there is an hour and a half video. So the author of the book is in the upper right-hand corner, both of them. So this is screenshotted from the presentation, and it outlines the process that we can use over the course of this year for discerning. So we're in the first quarter of the year, we're in the discerning phase, and we're just starting the process of talking with these groups. The next step for us will be at our church council in March. We will have to vote if we want to officially enter the discernment phase, at which point we have to send an official letter to the district superintendent to say that we would like to explore this it's in consultation with the district superintendent, is what the book of discipline says. So we have to invite the consultation. And then we need to form a prayer team and a discernment work group. So that's people who will continue this process of, we'd like obviously to talk with the small groups and the ministry teams within the life of the church and really encourage people to be aware of what we're discussing and get input and feedback. And, I would bet that, many of us will go home and as we think about this, other things will occur to us, so we want to gather we want to keep gathering all those thoughts together. So the discernment team is the team that will do that. And so if that's something that you feel led to be a part of, let us know. Then if we make a decision that this is the path we want to try, then we would begin planning for a charge conference vote. So that would be, thinking about who we would nominate to this, calling a special church conference where every member has a vote and making that formal decision. And then the training for those areas. And as you can imagine, the most challenging thing about adopting this structure is staying on task with governance and not management and implementation. And so ways of functioning to make sure that we do that well is the bulk of the training. And then if we adopt it and vote on it and nominate it and get trained on it, then we would begin using it in the 2023 calendar year. All right. Okay. So these are just some discussion questions kind of pulled from the book and created by us. And we don't have to have answers to all of these, but if this generates a thought in your head, please share. What is working well? How might a change be a better use of our time and support?
I think one thing that I've seen works well is, and I've especially seen this in search plants and in some other areas where there is one person that is handling communications for that particular.
Yes, Sally does a wonderful job
they're
at,
handling
yes.
the email communications.
Yes.
They're handling the scheduling, the calendar,
Yes.
and all that. So that to me is key to every single group, task force.
Absolutely true.
Everything that we do is still dependent on those communication systems and how well those work.
You're right. You're right. And side note, our new database system is designed to make that easier. And so, we could, if Sally were interested, we could have Sally signed into our database and send email out from the database, which makes it easier to keep track for the church to keep track of who is in that communication thread. Because, I mean, you know, we could look at all of the email addresses, but you know what I mean? We could bring up a list then of everyone that's receiving these communications from the church side. And it also keeps us, you know, in better shape if somebody's hospitalized, or, you know what I mean, in terms of, you know, shifting those structures.
Helps with accountability too.
It does. It absolutely does. Yes. Ready for the next questions? All right. Okay, so what is not working well in our current structure? What are the costs of shifting to a new structure? How might we mitigate those? And cost being a broad term, you know.
What was that?
Right. So our current structure is very manpower intensive, which is not serving us well. Yeah. Did I say that right? Yeah. Accountable. Simplified accountable structure. It's not an easy one on the memory. Yeah. I don't think that's a term we'll keep.
We need something else in mind.
Right.
I mean, the one thing that I think we would not have a problem with is that second part of that first question, where I don't think we have too many hard boundaries where it's like trustee says, don't go beyond here. This is my area. Or, you know, family life tells evangelism to, you know, get out of their lane. I don't.
We work and play well together.
We do work and play well together. Yeah. And let me see if anybody has any questions online.
Yes, good idea.
While you're doing that, in the structure of the people, if we were talking about quarter implement that, I noticed the position that was in there called staff coach. Is that something from outside the church that helps us?
That's a great question. There are such things as a SAS coach. And we could hire a coach to help us through this process. Some annual conferences have people who are trained as SAS coaches to consult, but we are not one of those conferences. So we do have some sister churches who have adopted or in the process of adopting this. Grace in Wilmington, I think, is about where we are now in terms of looking at this. So, yeah.
And you already mentioned that you know someone that has already implemented it, a former PS.
Yeah.
Implemented it in their larger church.
Yes.
We would probably lean on other people.
Yes, and she did offer to join us via Zoom, you know, help us.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I should have touched on that.
If anyone online has a question, come off mute or type it in the chat.
So, and the Kay is her name. So Kay is the coach who trains people to be coaches in this, who she developed this model along with the other author who I can't think of his name, who's a district superintendent in the Arkansas conference. And Kay was actually on staff while my friend was a district superintendent in the same conference. So they worked fairly closely together as she was working on all of this. You know, they're in the third edition when she was working on the first edition of the book. Yeah, Bernie.
So there are other churches that have adapted this and it's working well for them.
Yes.
I can't see how it would not work out.
Yes, agreed. Yes. We have, I don't know how many churches in Pendel. I'd be curious. I know there's a handful because I put it on the Pendel clergy chat and I got some feedback, but I don't know exactly how many. It's definitely on the newer side. And then there are some conferences that, you know, have churches that have been using it for 5 and 10 years. Yeah, but I don't think we have anyone that long real local.
Smaller churches have been using this in the Virginia conference for probably 10 years, if not 15.
Yeah, is it the now model though?
I think so.
Yeah.
Or It's
The
either
nurture,
the
outreach,
now
witness.
or somewhere in between.
Yeah, right,
I think it was headed, the now model was heading towards this.
probably.
Kind of
I haven't paid much attention to that model lately. They might have merged.
And I would say one of the other things that I think is working well now is the concept of our steering committee, which really this becomes, trustees and steering committee on steroids.
Mhm.
So I think that's another area that, we got a lot of things that are working. And that's sort of, as you're going through this process, a lot of the things are like, well, we don't have that issue. We don't have that issue. But there are some benefits to it.
Mhm. Yep. And, going back to Nancy's question too, and I think this is important to say because I think it's a strength. This would give us a chance to be intentional about having a representative, diverse leadership board, to make sure that we have, younger people represented, to make sure that we have, people from both worship services, et cetera, and make sure that that diversity is at the table whenever we make big decisions.
That also goes back to looking at, to use the old term for nominations, of looking at the gifts and graces of what you've got in the church. Those
Yes.
currently serving and those that might have gifts and graces that we don't have.
Right, that's right. That's right. Okay, next questions to see if they generate anything among us. How does our current structure respond to new ministry ideas or creative solutions? How proactive is our current structure in looking for opportunities and taking risks? How are we at setting the strategic direction of the church? What opportunities are we missing because we're overworking the same people? How might a well-aligned board be able to claim more opportunities? Alex.
Some ministries right now are full to the brim with responsibility and activity in the operation of their weekly or monthly charges.
Yes.
With consolidation, how is that going to free up any time to respond to the ideas and that kind of thing?
That's a great question. I think that I'm not going to name names, but I'll give an example. I can think of people that we have who very faithfully come and attend committee meetings. And our structure demands that. We need people who come and attend meetings. That's what we ask for. But that is pretty much what they do, is attend. And so the hope would be that those people, even if they just transfer that hour a month to some different way of serving, that they would be activated to join an existing ministry or meet a short-term ministry need, like writing a budget. Yeah.
I don't think that this is the panacea. It's not going to cure every issue. It's not going to cure. How do we get someone to sign up to do this specific task? That task is going to continue. What we hope is that by going through something like this, the shorter term nature of the assignments or I don't want to use the word assignment.
The ministry.
Use the shorter term assignment of the ministry would allow us to maybe be more attractive to people rather than signing up for a 3-year hardship tour on SPRC. But the one thing that I would say is, we talk about what opportunities are we missing because of this. We've got some people that are extremely, taxed to the max. And one opportunity that I know that we missed was this past Monday was the deadline to apply for a grant to help the city in their efforts to recover from the pandemic. The city of Dover had an ARPA fund, America Recovery something Act. There was an opportunity that we could have said, hey, how can we help the people that are disadvantaged in our community? How to put a grant in. It's a short grant. It really is. We didn't have the people who could have done it probably, they're all maxed out. So my question would have been, if we didn't have so many other things, could someone have found the hour to write that grant? And or someone on that strategic board could have picked up on that. So there's an area that I think we lost an opportunity.
And here's the thing, adding to that, sometimes when there's a need like that, it doesn't get communicated to everybody, so that somebody hidden, could have raised their hand and said, hey, I think I can do that now. So it's preparing for certainty and uncertainty.
And I think that goes back, I think, when someone about the gifts of the Holy Spirit that are among all of us, and doing that spiritual gifts inventory and finding out from people, hey, I'm willing to do this. I could do grant writing, that kind of thing.
And just knowing the people that are on your membership period and what they've done, regardless of blending gifts and grace, it's, all right, what have you been doing for the past 20 years of your work career?
Right.
But one of the things that used to work here, and I don't know if we're still doing it, but really we're all volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that worked when I first came here, and I think we do this from time to time, but we fill out a sheet of what we can do, all the things that we can do and that we can do well. And that's there as a database for when these things come up. And with all of the new technology and
Yeah, I think our
everything,
new tool does that, right, Amy? Let's do a spiritual
it would
gifts.
be real easy to be able to search and bring that list of people up and go down and call them. But a lot of this is volunteer management.
Yeah, that's right.
And how we do that as well. And that's from the bottom up part of it, but that's how things have changed.
Right.
That we do have the ability to do that now.
I would say that we would need a lot of prayer to get people to fill out those spiritual gifts inventory, because we have done it in the past, and response has been underwhelming.
They're too long, some of them.
We heard it.
I can see 3 people in this room that would write a heck of a grant proposal that would not be turned down. I just didn't hear a thing about it.
Yeah.
With such a solicitation, are we identifying what the needs are, or are we just having a blank for people to look? I think if we identify what our core needs are, and we list those in the summary of options,
Yeah.
we're gonna be more willing to
Self-assign.
assess. Yeah, I can do that.
That's a great point.
So if they just have a blank sheet to fill out.
Yeah.
I don't really know anything. So I'm not-
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's definitely the kind of thing that we could use Realm to do. Realm is designed to be like almost like an internal Facebook kind of thing, like, to have posts and that kind of thing for people to chat. We just haven't gotten to that level yet, but we could absolutely have posts out there that say, this is the description of the needs that we have and that kind of thing. Yeah,
That goes back to the communication point that Gigi was mentioning. Just,
absolutely.
Whoever can say, all right, let me have access and put this out on the Facebook.
Yeah.
The church.
Yeah.
Facebook.
Also, people sign up on how to do this.
That's right. Everybody has to have they have to have accepted their own invitation in order to be in the group. You have to be an insider for this one.
For those online, basically, we've emphasized that while Realm has a lot of really cool tools to use, and just like we said about the spiritual gifts inventory, which Donna comment was too long.
The past one, the past one I did, it was like this whole booklet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. And, but the point though is that that's if there's an area that I think is going to be key, it's getting that feedback, getting that communication, getting that interaction, getting people involved, which of course is part of the Great Commission, but getting them to make a commitment, more or less. Next slide.
Next one. I already touched on that a little bit about our structure being developed in the 60s and 70s. And I mean, this really focuses on, thinking about this, making us more nimble. How does that create an advantage for us?
And I think that, again, to what Gigi said about that grant, I mean, we did put it out to a few of the groups that would normally be, but you're right, we didn't think about expanding it beyond, what was it? We sent it out to
Missions,
trustees, missions, you know, and I think
right, that was it, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe if we're more nimble about it and we have an opportunity, maybe there's a way that we could say, hey, is anyone interested in trying to, like, one of the things we talked about was expanding our feeding on maybe we could have gotten some funding for that or expansion or something. We hadn't quite got that point, but there's definitely ways that I think technology may also help us with this SAS implementation.
Okay, next.
Jonas,
Oh, that's it. Okay. We have, it's 11:27,
Did it?
so we stayed within an hour roughly. Yay! So I don't want to cut us off, but I don't want to keep us sitting in chairs unnecessarily either. So, anything else for the good of the order? Yes.
I'm concerned about the consolidation of responsibilities and the brevity of term. How continuity is proposed to be maintained.
Oh, that's a great
Repeat the question.
continuity from,
For them.
yeah, for the structure. Yeah, that's a good point. Like in terms of if we have 3-year classes on the leadership team, that we could lose continuity as people rotate off.
Yeah. So where's the benchmark?
Right. I think that's worth thinking about. I don't have a good answer for that right now. I mean, what?
Experience is key.
Experience is key.
But that also portends longevity in the position. We're talking about reversing that development.
Yes, I would say right now, I mean, again, I'm just thinking out loud. I think it's a good question. One, we do have within the staff, we've adopted the military term continuity binders, which lays out, you know, I jokingly call them if I'm hit by a bus binder, you know, like if somebody has to step in and do this, these are the things that need done. So ideally, we would have that same kind of thing, you know, to help us to maintain continuity in our other places of ministry. And yes, and then the other thing is that, you know, people rotate off, but, you know, we're still here. So, you know, hopefully any sort of hanging fire or ongoing thing that, you know, then a term expires, you know, if we needed to, we could still go back and pull on that person and say, hey, remind us, you know, about this. That's all I can think of now, but I think it's a great question.
I'd like to respond to that if I can, because one of the things that is commonly done is that there, in order to keep that continuity, is that there's a leadership transition period, and the one leader is going to stay on with the
to teach the next person,
make sure that that new person
knows,
is well informed.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, even if we're transitioning, you know, it could be a process of, you know, we keep outgoing members of the board on the email distribution list for X amount of time, you know, just to kind of keep them in the loop and make sure that we don't lose things. Or we could have intentional, you know, sit down time for passing the torch or whatever. And definitely worth, you know, thinking about.
And then that succession planning is really important, because you can have somebody who has it all in their head, basically. They've been doing it for 15 years.
Right, and they know it all.
And it goes automatically.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to get
to
somebody
translate.
new in. That's a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
So how do we?
Nature of the beast is doing a 3-year class, doing the 3 classes of 3 years. As one class goes off, you still got 2 separate classes of experienced people built in.
Yes.
You complement it, you know, so those 2 remaining classes will help the new people
to carry it forward. That's true. It is built in that way.
and you build in the continuity binders and those voices in our heads that we can say, here's what we do.
And
Here's what we've been doing.
another potential tool that we picked up this year is that we have an expanded number of church official church email boxes that we could theoretically, if you're in charge of trustees, all your emails going as a trustee is going to that. The next trustee we'll say finance, next finance person comes in, they get that, they get that mailbox and they have historical stuff to search on. I mean, that's again, the problem with that's a little bit of a,
Right.
yeah.
Bernie?
Yeah, well, right now, I'm going, I said earlier, you can do 3 years, then you're able to do another 3 years. So the 6 years that you're there, you would hope that somebody's gonna come behind you when you go off and take the place of that.
That's right.
And keep that ball rolling.
That's right.
I'm not sure the reality though is that isn't more on the line of, oh, they're doing a great job, there's no reason for you to train up.
Yes. Yes, you're right. And being intentional about training our next person is definitely a weak spot, within our ministry function in general in this church.
And historically, in any church, that's been an issue.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, that is definitely something that needs attention.
Bob will be around forever. We don't need to replace Bob.
Yes. Yeah, right. Oh, all right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Any online questions?
Well, I put one in the chat, but
You got it? No, you didn't. We'll create more work for those 9 people.
I'm just asking, yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely a risk that we will need to work to mitigate. And that, again, that'll be the difference between governance and management.
Well, thank you. We're going to shut it down. We'll figure out a way to put it online. Thank you, everyone who was in.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.